Hello, and welcome back to Culturopolis, the show where I give my thoughts on the latest pieces of media releasing this month in culture. We've now entered the double digits for this series, and what better time than October, the spooky season itself. We're going to take a look at some amazing art this month, like Killers of the Flower Moon and Marvel's Spider-Man 2. Then, we're also going to look at Five Nights at Freddy's. But anyway, without further ado, this is Culturopolis. First up is maybe Michael Caine's last ever performance, The Great Escaper. Bernard is a 90-year-old World War II vet who now lives in a care home with his wife. His plans to take part in the official D-Day Remembrance service are cancelled when he fails to make the booking. Instead, he runs away from the care home and goes to France on his own. Meanwhile, his wife, played by the late Glenda Jackson, stays behind with the staff of the care home, panicking, trying to figure out where her husband has gone. This was a very touching film, not just for the story it's based on, but also the context of these two tremendous actors both working together for their final film. The highlight primarily is the performances from Michael Caine and Glenda Jackson, both just under 90 at the time of filming and still are absolutely incredible. Their relationship in this film is just so heartwarming, and I loved every scene of them together. The whole story does not quite hold on its own, in my opinion, specifically the original sections made for the drama, such as the Afghanistan veteran and World War II flashbacks, just didn't quite have the same impact on me. I would have rather they spent more time on the period where Bernard comes back to England but is tagged on by the press. I felt like we spent 2 minutes on that at most, when the whole section was such a big part of the true events that the film is based on. That being said, there were other moments that got me very emotional, if not for their incredible performances of Glenda Jackson and Michael Caine. The scene of Glenda Jackson's character where she remembers the first ever erotic moment with her life partner, cutting between a flashback and her in the present, was just so beautiful and genuine, and it just melts your heart seeing such incredible acting from someone now past. Issues I do have with the editing and pacing did stick out at times. In a lot of scenes, especially the flashbacks, they tended to do the old bad frame rate slow motion where everything looks extremely choppy, and it's perhaps one of my least favourite things in a lot of movies. Then generally I thought the ending of the film was extremely rushed, and I hope that they would take more time with the final scenes between Bernard and Irene, mostly because they were my favourite. But overall, this was a sweet film. I loved the 2 stars in it, and I was a major fan of watching this light-hearted adventure that still has some tremendous lessons and humour, whilst also tugging on your heartstrings. Next up is the month's first horror movie, and that is The Exorcist Believer. Victor Fielding is a single father raising his daughter Angela after his wife passed away. The daughter wishes to connect with her deceased mother, so she and her friend Catherine go into the woods to perform a seance. The 2 girls then go missing, only to be found in a barn, but upon their findings, the girls seem completely different to how they were. Quiet, rude, abrasive, a downright bit spooky. It is clear that they have been possessed, and it's up to the parents of both girls, as well as a Marvel team-up of characters, to join together to perform an exorcism. This is from David Gordon Green, the same director as the Halloween soft reboot, and Blumhouse decided it was an innovative idea to repeat the same formula, just with a different franchise. So they decided to butcher one of the most prestigious horror movies of all time with The Exorcist Believer. I watched the first Exorcist the same day as this new entry in the franchise, and I have to say it was like washing down an incredible steak dinner with some Wetherspoon's chicken strips. The original Exorcist is amazing, in my opinion. It is what every horror movie should aim to achieve in creating something that is not about the scares or gore, but about the effects on the characters. It's amazing, but The Exorcist Believer is a joke. This is a very silly movie that does very little to actually scare you other than the odd jump scare every 10 minutes or so. It's cheesy when it wants to be taken seriously and disrespectful to what is paying a homage to. They bring back the main character of the original Exorcist, played by Ellen Bernstein, who shows up maybe 3 times. It's very funny how quickly the movie tries to get rid of her, just proving that she was really only there for nostalgia with no actual narrative purpose. The rest of the characters are far worse off, however, since none of the cast are particularly memorable, their defining character traits just being their religious beliefs or the thing that the demon uses against them in the final act. Our hero, Victor, does not exactly tackle any conflict other than the events taking place. You could argue there is a certain reveal in the final act, but it goes nowhere, and I was expecting Victor to confront this part of himself and tell his daughter, but no, they just completely forgot about about it. Then you look at the original Exorcist, and it's all about inner conflict. Chris McNeil is an agnostic/atheist, and she goes through so much to keep her daughter's ailment silent, denying the fact that she has been possessed, and then coming to terms with the fact that it was her daughter who killed Burke, her boss. Then there is the priest of that film, Damien, whose mother passes away, and he loses his faith in Christ, but must push that aside to ensure that a mother does not have to grieve for her daughter. The Exorcist Believer just doesn't have that same complexity, and you end up just not caring about the characters, the drama, or anything that's taking place. And that is ignoring the fact that the movie is the definition of tell not show. Everything is so predictable and spoon-fed to the audience that the ending is more irritating because you already figured out what's going to happen 20-30 minutes ago. So yeah, boring, uneventful, not scary, shameless. If you haven't seen The Exorcist from 1973, you absolutely must. It's objectively amazing, but avoid The Exorcist Believer because either David Gordon Green did not care as much about this movie as Halloween, or he just didn't understand the original. Now we're going to be talking about Killers of the Flower Moon. In 1920s America, Ernest Burkhart comes home from war to work for his uncle. He finds love with Molly, a member of the Osage Nation and proprietors of oil in the surrounding area. His uncle, who likes to be referred to as King, gives Ernest the idea to marry into the Osage family and have direct lineage to the oil money. What follows is a tale of deception, greed, and murder. This is a brand new movie from Martin Scorsese, who is a world-renowned director for his accomplishments in Hollywood for Goodfellas, Wolf of Wall Street, and most recently The Irishman. This is a fantastically well-made story, and everything about it screams a love of cinema and acknowledgement of American history. This is partly because the Osage people themselves actually helped with the production of the film to make it as authentic as possible. The authenticity goes a long way in making the story as impactful as it is, because the evolution of the characters and the power dynamics that are depicted throughout the whole film just become devastating by the end. This definitely, at least to me, felt like a very personal film for Scorsese. More than, say, The Irishman or any of his more recent films, something about his direction and, some appearances later on really pointed out how much he cared about the truth of what took place almost a century ago. I find it a shame personally that the first thing, or the most important thing to a lot of people when Killers of the Flower Moon is discussed, is the runtime. I hate arguments that films should not be longer than 2 hours. It is just so simple of an argument. The question is not about if films as a whole should be any length. The question is if the specific story uses whatever time it is given effectively. For some films like Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny or the Hobbit trilogy, they take far too long, and there are scenes that have no impact or consequence to them at all. Then there are films like Renfield, which in my opinion were too short or focused on things that were inconsequential, whilst other aspects felt slept on. Now, does Killers of the Flower Moon use the 3.5 hour runtime that it has to full effectiveness? I think so. I honestly can't think of a scene that did not drive this story forward or was not entertaining. There is, however, an argument that Martin Scorsese did take his time with this movie, unlike his most popular films like Goodfellas and Wolf of Wall Street, which were a much faster pace, which I think is okay. Another aspect which makes the film so entertaining are the performances. Everyone in this cast is absolutely amazing. Everyone brings their all. DiCaprio and De Niro, of course, are amazing as they always are, but Lily Gladstone totally, absolutely was the star, in my opinion. If I have any complaint, it's that she was not in the movie more, but I understand why she wasn't. I love Gladstone's performance in this film. The character of Molly brings out so many emotions when she's on screen, and I just found the chemistry between her and DiCaprio very touching. I cannot help but bring attention to this film's soundtrack as well. Scorsese has said how he's always loved the old westerns and has channeled that into the music of this film. It rhymes the Osage traditional music with classic western riffs and an incredible modern bass line which makes many scenes so memorable for me. Whilst writing this episode, in fact, I listened to the soundtrack on repeat. I highly recommend you do as well. Killers of the Flower Moon is wonderful. Downright artwork, if I am truthful. I loved everything about this film. Scorsese once again challenges himself and the audience with a story which certainly brings with it a lot of emotional weight. I understand that soon it will be releasing on Apple TV+, but I implore you to watch this in a cinema and really take in what is delivered. You will be rewarded for it. Next up is a comedy called Sumotherhood from writer, director and star Adam Deacon. Rico and Kane are two friends who want to be proper criminals, and under the debt of 15 grand, they try robbing a famous rapper and a bank. This takes them down an even larger hole of misunderstandings with drug dealers, racist police officers, and every washed up British celebrity you can think of. This is apparently a sequel to quite a few movies, starting with 2006's Kidulthood and then Adulthood in 2008, both directed by Adam Deacon and starring Noel Clarke. Then 3 years later, Another Hood came out, which was instead more of a comedy, now starring Adam Deacon as well as directing. Then, in 2016, Noel Clarke returned with Brotherhood, which returned to the more dramatic roots. Now, after 7 years, and Noel Clarke's criminal behaviour coming out, Adam Deacon returns with this movie, and it's not that good. I didn't find Sumotherhood all that funny. I could tell they were trying to go for the vibe of stoner movies like Friday, even referencing that movie with a poster in the main character's bedroom, but it's just not for me. Most of the time jokes didn't land, and if they did get a chuckle out of me, it was more for the ridiculousness of the cameos that were brought in, which were all extremely poorly done, I might add. As in, you can tell the cameos were shot on a different day to when the rest of the entire scene was filmed. Then there's the main characters of Rico and Kane. They're just fine. They didn't captivate me personally all that much, but the villain Tyrese was just extremely annoying. He was played by Richie Campbell, who I really like in the crime drama Grace, but in this movie, I mean, God, I just hate it every second because, like, the whole character is pretty much loud equals funny, and the first scene you already get pretty tired of him. Generally, as well, the effects were quite distracting. I wasn't a fan of many of the characters, really. The story was quite a mess, but I think that was on purpose. It's safe to say that I'm not interested in watching any of the other movies in this franchise. I guess I can't really recommend you watch them either. Cat Person is the next film we're going to be talking about. This is the one that I had no expectations going into, but was incredibly surprised by, actually. Margot is a student who works at the local cinema, and whilst there she meets Robert. They begin texting and hanging out, and he seems nice but quite awkward, and it leads to Margot and her friends to believe that he may be more dangerous than they realise. I really can't say much more than that without giving away the rest of the movie, but I really liked Cat Person. I had not seen anything about the film before watching it, but I thought it was a very clever way to portray modern dating, specifically for women. The film opens with a quote from Margaret Atwood, which is, "Men are afraid women will laugh at them, and women are afraid that men will kill them." That really drives the whole story and is a wonderful way to introduce the film by planting the seeds of that insecurity with the character of Robert. This, I thought, was a highly creative way of using film to tell a story. I thought so many scenes really stuck out to me, and I keep thinking about them even days after watching. The walk home with the AirPods is one that comes to mind, and the scene where Margot and her friend Taylor are on the bed and texts flood in. I often hate it when modern movies use that pop-up on the side of the screen to show text that characters were either receiving or sending, but Susanna Fogel used them excellently in this scene, perfectly delivering this sense of dread and fear. Performances were all stellar in my opinion. Amelia Jones was wonderful in this leading role, and I loved the way that she would constantly switch mid-scene between funny, confused, and terrified. I thought Nicholas Braun was good too. Many will know him from Succession, but I've yet to watch that. The scenes of those two actors together really are the best because there's just so much tug of war trying to understand the reality of the situation on both sides, and I think it's really well done. Cat Person was fantastic. I thought everything about it, from the performances, the music, the direction and editing, was really just cleverly done. It was so smart in the way that it conveyed all of this through all the different methods of film. And I think this is definitely going to be a movie people will be talking about years from now when the topic of feminist media comes into conversation. Definitely not a horror movie, but it was definitely scary at points, and absolutely scarier than the next film we're going to be talking about. Here's the big one. Five Nights at Freddy's is the new horror movie from Blumhouse after, I want to say, 8 or 9 years in development hell. Passed between multiple studios and scripts and directors, we now have this movie adaptation of the highly popular game series. So, Michael Schmidt loses his job as a security guard and is pressured to find a new job so he can take care of his sister. He begins work at a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, Chuck E. Cheese type restaurant for kids that has been closed down for many years. It's discovered that the animatronics that are in the building are actually possessed by children who were murdered in the 80s. Mike, for some reason, goes back to the place and figures that his sister should come along as well, and they both try to survive the night. This movie sucked. Let me get this straight. You think the Five Nights at Freddy's movie is bad?
I do. And I'm tired of pretending it's not.
Do not get me wrong, if you enjoyed it, more power to you, and I'm glad you had fun, but I thought this was an absolute mess from start to finish. First of all, it just doesn't feel like the original games. It doesn't. I would compare this to the Halo show from last year, as they pretty much got everything correct in terms of the looks and sounds of the original games, but the story and atmosphere is just completely wrong. The animatronics are not scary, they're just not, and I'm not a fan of the argument that they are children possessing the suit, so why would they be scary? Because it ignores the pull of the original game. The fact that they are possessed by murdered children makes Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and even Golden Freddy vengeful and angry. These are kids having a hissy fit, and they have the power to take revenge. That is scary. Here they don't capture that at all. Instead it's presented in a way where the robots are more sympathetic characters rather than antagonists. It's just completely missing the point of the game it's attempting to adapt. Other than that, I think everything in terms of the pacing and character decisions are very sloppy. First of all, the film takes far too long to get to where it needs to be. I mean, Mike needs a job, but he doesn't just need a job. He needs a job because he was fired. But he doesn't just need a job because he was fired. He needs a job because he was fired and he's about to get evicted. But he doesn't just need a job because he was fired and he's about to get evicted. He needs a job because he's fired and he was about to get evicted and he has a sister to take care of. But he doesn't just need a job because he was fired and he's about to get evicted and he has a sister to take care of. He needs a job because he was fired and he was about to get evicted and he has a sister to take care of, and he has an aunt that wants to get custody rights for his sister, so he needs to get a job for that. And and he can just need a job. It's all I'm saying. I mean, other than that, all the characters, including Mike, make the strangest decisions with no actual reason. And the film focuses far too much on family dramas with Mike and Vanessa, when it really should be focusing more on Matthew Lillard's character, in my opinion. The whole B-plot with the aunt was extremely boring, and I feel like the only good scenes in the film, which were the security guard and robbers getting attacked by the animatronics, were added in because someone realised there wasn't enough horror movie in their horror movie. As I said before, the look and the sound of the movie is very faithful to the game. I appreciate the effort that was made in the special effects and keeping the animatronics practical throughout. However, I honestly doubt anyone who has no understanding of the game will get any enjoyment out of this, because 80% of the fun is pointing and noticing an Easter egg from something else that has no reason to be there, but it just is. I can't recommend this movie. I genuinely just didn't like it. And with how successful it's been, I'm sure it's going to get at least 8 sequels at this point, so hopefully one of those is better than this one. The first 3 episodes of the latest season of Rick and Morty have released. These first episodes involve the return of Mr. Poopy Butthole and Unity, Jerry and Rick doing a Freaky Friday, and even Hugh Jackman's there. This is the first season without co-creator and star Justin Roiland after allegations that caused him to depart from the show. The big question now is, how well do the new voice actors recreate the iconic voices of the titular characters and some others? I would say for the most part, Rick and other characters like Mr. Poopy Butthole are pretty much the exact same as the original voices. Morty, however, is a bit less alike to the original, but he slowly grew on me as the episodes kept going, I will admit. The first 3 episodes are a step up from the previous season in my opinion. Season 6 was probably my least favourite of the whole series. I liked the ideas and jokes, however in these 3 episodes there still isn't quite the same level of improvisation as previous seasons, but the writing has had a step up and they definitely have found their comfort spot for the show. I did find the evolution of Rick's character as well, from what we see, quite interesting, and it definitely feels like they're building to an arc for him, which has sparked my curiosity. The animation and art style are also pretty solid. Isn't it exactly an improvement, but a solid continuation of the series as a whole, and by no means feels cheaper than any previous season. I look forward to seeing how the rest of the series continues and what else Dan Harmon and the rest of the team have in store. Now this one I'm excited for, because we are going to be talking about maybe my most anticipated game other than Tears of the Kingdom, and that is Marvel's Spider-Man. Oh, wow, no, Marvel's Spider-Man the game. Nope, yep, that's my bad. No, Marvel's Spider-Man 2 the game. Oh, come on! Marvel's Spider-Man 2 for PS5 is all about Peter Parker and Miles Morales, New York's 2 Spider-Men, as they work both together and separately to take on Kraven the Hunter, a military leader who wishes to find an enemy worth fighting. And where better than New York, with all sorts of superpowered people like Scorpion, Mr. Negative, Black Cat, Tombstone, and a brand new threat in Venom. If you haven't already heard my review for the first 2 games from Insomniac, please do take a look at last month's episode. TLDR, Spider-Man PS4 is my favourite game of all time, and I absolutely loved the Spider-Man Miles Morales game, so I couldn't wait for this sequel, and I have to say I was far from disappointed. Spider-Man 2 is a fantastic evolution of the first 2 games, melding together the best aspects of both, and even making brand new additions, which make this the greatest Spider-Man game of all time, and possibly even the greatest superhero game of all time. Starting with the story, it immediately captures both of its protagonists and their roles perfectly. Miles and Peter working simultaneously as Spider-Man is something that has never been done before other than in the comic books, and it works brilliantly in this game. The 2 Spider-Man face challenges and help each other through them, and even have their own conflicts between themselves, which is a very fresh but fitting way to have 2 different Spider people in the same media. The gameplay is perhaps the biggest step up from the previous games. Insomniac really took advantage of the capabilities of the PS5 with this game. The opening sequence, which has already been shown off with the Sandman, is just amazing. There was one moment that actually had me audibly go, whoa. Insomniac is very good at using the technology of the PS5 and creating set pieces or moments that are extremely fluid and couldn't be done as smoothly on film or in a cartoon. Traversal has seen major improvements as well. Everything is much faster than the first 2 games. They brought back the Venom dash and jump from Miles Morales, and also gave Peter his version of that ability as well. Then there's also the addition of the web wings, which add a whole new level to traversal and make the efficiency of travel even more enjoyable, meaning I would rarely fast travel even if it does take less than 2 seconds. The removal of the gadget wheel has proven controversial for some, but it means combat is far more fluid and also more difficult. I played both PS4 and Miles Morales on the hardest difficulty and rarely died in either, but in Spider-Man there was definitely more of a learning curve to the way combat works, with parrying and the new enemy varieties, making the new cycle of combat much more of a challenge, and I am completely up for it. I also have to acknowledge the music of the game from Daredevil composer John Paisano, which is superb, rivaling that of Danny Elfman from the Raimi movies and their soundtracks. This was a great mix of both the original game soundtrack as well as Miles Morales's, and music played a key role in the atmosphere of the heroes and villains. However, I do have some nitpicks. I did come upon a few glitches in my playthrough and one crash during the Black Cat mission. Nothing major that forced me to restart, and I'm sure Insomniac will push out a patch which fixes those issues if they haven't done so already. Other minor things are animations can be limited compared to the first 2 games. For example, stopping a generic criminal's vehicle during a chase only has 1 set animation compared to the previous games, which had around 4 or 5. It's a small detail, but it definitely made doing crimes less rewarding after a while. But Spider-Man 2 is still an incredible experience and definitely worth getting a PS5 for, in my opinion. I'm still unsure if this is my favourite Spider-Man game compared to the first one, but I will absolutely be replaying it once the New Game Plus releases later this year. And with the teasing of a sequel or perhaps even a DLC, I cannot wait for whatever Insomniac has coming next. And that is everything for October. Now it's time for retro and recommendations, pieces of media from the past few decades or even years which I think deserve some love today. Now of course for the spooky month I had to recommend some spooky movies. It took a while for me to think of something that was truly worth mentioning, but this month we are going to be talking about The Thing from 1982 and Hereditary. Starting with The Thing, this takes place in an American Antarctic research station. When a helicopter chases down and starts shooting at a random dog, it catches the attention of the Americans. The Norwegian scientists piloting the helicopter started a shootout which resulted in their deaths, but before the Americans can figure out what took place, they realise that they have brought in an alien that has the ability to infect and assimilate people and animals. All of a sudden the whole crew have no idea who to trust and must work together and against each other to understand who is a friend and who is a creature from another world. The Thing is a fantastic horror movie. It tells a really nuanced story of trust and survival using very creative effects, set design and writing that explores intelligent characters who figure out the situation pretty quickly and work out clever ways to fight against the threat in front of them. We have an incredible cast of characters within this crew starring Kurt Russell and the Arbiter himself, Keith David. The characters are all quite likeable and it's great to see all the varying reactions to situations and ideas to fight the thing. The titular thing itself is very foreboding. I loved the practical effects in this movie to depict the thing, all have that shock factor to them and are still disturbing to this day. The way they depict the creature through all the levels of its imitation of people is very cleverly done and adds an underlying level of backstory visually to what the thing even is. I highly recommend you watch this movie during the winter period to get you in that snowy mood, but be prepared to be utterly terrified. Now finally we're going to be talking about Hereditary. Annie and her family mourn for her mother, and immediately after, strange occurrences take place leading to even more pain and death. Annie watches the madness unfold as she uncovers more and more about her mother's life and the curse that she inherited from her. Hereditary is the first feature film from Ari Aster, who has become a king of modern horror recently with Midsommar and Beau is Afraid. Hereditary is still my favourite, however, because of the family drama that is so rooted in this story, and the effect that it had on me personally being much greater than the other two films. I don't recommend anyone does what I did when watching this film and put it on at 1 o'clock in the morning, because it will be extremely difficult to eventually fall asleep after you do so. The first 2/3 of the movie is basically a long build-up of dread and stress, which absolutely explodes in the final act and causes perhaps the most animalistic terror using sound, or silence should I say, as well as horrifying visuals that just absolutely floor you. I understand to some that sounds like the worst thing ever, but Hereditary is still jaw-dropping in the way it delivers this tale of painful situations and hateful family relations. Plus all the mysteries that still surround the movie, leading to endless theories on what it all means, really goes to show the level of detail Aster put into the world building and atmosphere of this movie. If you're a horror fan and still have yet to see this movie, then you are sorely missing out, because this is a shining example of what modern horror is capable of and what new up-and-coming directors should aspire towards. And that is everything for October. A couple disappointments, a couple surprises, and some absolutely amazing entertainment all around. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, pass around, all that lovely stuff. Stay tuned for the next episode where we will be talking about the Marvels, Napoleon, Saltburn, and much more. Thanks guys, bye bye.